Thanks for coming to this event at UCL today. It's great to see so many people here. My name is Oliver Patel. I'm a research associate and manager of the UCL European Institute. The UCL European Institute is UCL's hub for research, collaboration, engagement on Europe and the EU. And our event series features high-profile thinkers and policymakers discussing all things Europe and European affairs. Today, our focus is on technology policy and the EU. We're delighted and extremely grateful to welcome EU Commissioner Věra Jourová for a discussion on artificial intelligence, privacy, and big tech, Europe's response. She's going to give a forward-looking talk on the EU's approach to regulating technology in the years ahead. Since 2014, Commissioner Jourová has been the EU Commissioner for Justice, Consumers, and Gender Equality. As part of this position, she led on the development and implementation of the GDPR, as well as decisions such as the EU-US Privacy Shield. Prior to becoming a commissioner, Commissioner Jourová was a leading figure, is still a leading figure in Czech politics, and served as Minister for Regional Development in the Czech government. In terms of the format of today's discussion, Commissioner Jourová will speak for 30 minutes, and it will be followed by comments and questions from my colleague, Dr. Nathan Lee. Dr. Nathan Lee is a senior research associate at UCL's Institute of Health Informatics, and he's an expert on data, information governance, especially in healthcare and medicine. After Nathan's comments, there will be time for hopefully a lively Q&A with the audience and the panel. I'm personally thrilled that Commissioner Jourová is here to speak about these issues today. I think most people in the room are probably fascinated but also very concerned by a lot of the developments we see today. I'm instinctively pro-technology, but when I started looking through my activity.google.com, as well as my Google Maps timeline, I was pretty horrified to see the level of granular detail that this one company had on where I've been, what I've been doing, where I've been going, what I've been thinking for the past few years. And this is just what one company is voluntarily telling me. So it kind of made me think, is there really such a thing as privacy? Is there anything that governments or politicians can actually do, or is it all a bit of a losing battle? So I'm hoping that today Commissioner Jourová can make me a bit more optimistic. One final thing is that as we are joined by the Commissioner for Data Protection, I should say that the event today is being filmed. Photographs are being taken, so if you do not consent to your picture, a picture of yourself ending up on YouTube, please let us know afterwards. So without further ado, please give a warm welcome to Commissioner Jourová.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you for having us today here with my colleague Wojtek Talko, member of my cabinet, who wrote a fantastic speech which I'm not going to read. Sorry, Wojtek.
Fine.
It's fine. No, I think that we are a reasonable number of and good mixture of people who could have more direct contact. And when I will be reading 30 minutes, I can tell you I might kill your fascination in the matters related to digital and privacy. Well, in Brussels, everybody is now busy in filling in the top jobs. There is a very key time. The position of the presidents of the EU Commission and the Council and the European Foreign Affairs Minister and the chairman of the European Central Bank and the European Parliament. All these jobs are now available after the elections. And I am not applying for any of those. That's why I can be here today with you, competing with fantastic weather and fantastic London. Thank you for not reading the whole my long CV. If you have done so, I am also a former tourist guide to London. I loved the moments of placing the tourists by the Buckingham Palace and going to St. James's to feed the squirrels. So I have a lot of good memories. And also I think I am competing with your exam period now, not Mr. Dean, of course, but some of you. So thank you very much for coming here and for giving your time to our topic. Well, we should speak about artificial intelligence, privacy, and big tech Europe's response. So indeed, I have a lot of it in my portfolio and on my table, because when I think about how it happened to me, you have to look at the magical acronym GDPR, because I am a kind of gatekeeper. I have the key in my hand, because the protection of privacy is one of the most important things and one of the biggest challenges at the same time. There are a lot of uncertainties in the current world, and a lot of injustice and inequalities. These are all the matters I have to deal with in this current position. So a lot of uncertainties, but one big certainty, that the technology, digitalization and artificial intelligence will change the way we live, we work, we read things, we understand the world. Autonomous cars, smart cities, modern concepts of mobility, progress in medicine, education or transport, all of these things will be changing. And indeed, the question is how to address the challenges when you are in the position of the legislator. Of course, the Hamlet's question, to regulate or not to regulate, comes inevitably. And you know that the EU is quite good at regulation. And we decided to be careful and to wait, maybe to wait and see. GDPR is the basic fix. We have it. We have it in the process already more than 1 year. And we are looking into the development in digitalization and artificial intelligence from different angles, and we have up to now a kind of light touch approach. We don't want to kill innovations by regulations, which is, I think, very important component of what we are doing, or aspect. When we look at how competitive the EU is, especially in relation to US and China, when you look at artificial intelligence and areas, you see that we are lagging behind. So that's why we want to do 3 things: not to overregulate, to support by smart financing, and to keep the big brains in Europe, and to attract the big brains also from outside to work in Europe. I will come to artificial intelligence later. Speaking about the people and technologies, we have to bear in mind that the technological changes will really will change the world of labor. There is a recent study which estimates that up to 800 million jobs could disappear by 2030. And we see these shocking revelations related to labor. We face some other new situations. I will touch upon also the Cambridge Analytica case, foreign meddling in elections, security gaps in critical infrastructure like 5G and other things. These are all wake-up calls for us, and it also pushes us to think about who we are and what we need to maintain and save in Europe. I think that we must not let the technologies to work as disruptors and to cause harm to rule of law, democracy, fundamental rights and fairness. So these are all the aspects we look at when we think about the possible future regulatory framework. I kind of joked about the European elections. It's a serious thing. We will see, some say, more fragmentation in the European Parliament, but I would call it more wider or bigger diversity, and there will be the politicians from different political groups who will have to agree on a common approach, how to proceed further with setting the rules for digital world and for AI. For the moment, we have two principles in mind. Speaking now about digitalization, and speaking especially about the illegal content, we want to keep the principle that what is illegal offline should be also illegal online. And the second, as I said before, we have to be careful about regulation, because legislation is not always the best way to solve the problems. I will come to the illegal content in a minute, but just to share with you some of the moments I had in numerous talks with the managers of Facebook, Google, Twitter, Microsoft. We talked about the speed of development. What is first? Is it technology? Is it the money? Or is it the law? Or how it should be? Speaking about the law, as I said, we have the GDPR, which tries to be forward-looking set of rules. Speaking about other aspects, as I said, the EU tries to be careful, and we are looking at the speed development of the technologies, and we hope we will come on in due time to address the challenges. GDPR as a basic piece of regulation in the European Union. When the legislators started to prepare this piece of legislation, it was already in 2012, they knew that they have to replace the old rules, which dated from 1995, prehistoric time. I remember I saw the first mobile phone, a lady walking on Oxford Street, speaking to a mobile phone there, and I was quite shocked. You know, I come from the East, so we were a little bit slower. But when the legislators came with the data protection rules, many people, including the representatives of businesses, were very critical that this is a piece of paranoid work, that the things will not develop in such a wrong direction as the GDPR foresaw. It was a very ambitious plan from the side of the legislators to come with the rules which will combine or address two main things. One, that in Europe we recognize the protection of privacy as fundamental right, which means that you cannot sell your privacy, you cannot sell your identity. It's you. Your alter ego in digital, it's still you. But the second thing which the legislator had to address was that gradually your private data started to be used as money. So in principle, the people started to sell their identity. And sell is maybe not the right word, because the people were giving their identity to somebody who was selling their data and monetizing the data. That's why the EU came with the GDPR, which main purpose was to bring the control over the data of people back to their hands. When I came to this portfolio in 2014, and I started to understand what's happening to the private data of people, and when I started to think about this crowd handling, which is happening in digital sphere, believe me, it reminded me of my past, because I lived half of my life under the totalitarian regime. It is comparable. because in such a regime, we didn't know what was happening to us. We didn't have any rights. We didn't to have the control over our life. So I started to understand that GDPR was necessary. Now we are 1 year after the start of the implementation. The initial panic has weakened. I don't know how strong it was in UK.
Strong.
Strong, okay. How strong is it now?
It's still fairly strong. I think there's still a consideration of how to apply it in context, certainly across health and finance in particular. But we're seeing some clarity. Generally positive.
I've just had a very interesting debate with the ICO, with the information officer, and they still plan to clarify better, especially the rules for the small and medium enterprises, for the bakery shops and butchers and hairdressers and all the small companies which were panicking because somebody told them you will have to employ somebody as the data protection officer. And this kind of really alerting news. So we still need to explain better what it means, what GDPR means for those who do not sell the data, who do not monetize and process the data on everyday basis. We have the first studies. One of them was done by Deloitte. And the reflection is quite positive that the companies, including the very small ones, whose core business is processing of data, they say that the trust of their clients is the key asset. And the GDPR and compliance with GDPR is helping them to keep this business and to increase the trust of the people. We still have the statistics that 2/3 of Europeans are concerned about not having complete control over the information they provide online. So increasing the trust means that the business will also be safer from the point of view of the trust. And the CEOs of the big tech, all of them who I spoke to confirmed to me that GDPR was a must, that we needed to address the challenges by the regulation and that they do everything possible to be compliant. And if not, the enforcers will show whether they managed or not. I expect some big cases to come soon in the EU. GDPR is also a global reference or a global standard now. We see that at this moment there are about 108 countries in the world which have some data protection law. Minority of them has the rules which are comparable with GDPR. We have 11 countries where we already said yes, the protection is comparable with the European standards. To name some of them, Canada, New Zealand, Israel, some others. We have some arrangement with the United States where probably they will have the federal law. I don't know when, but the appetite in the United States to have the law similar to GDPR is very high now in the Congress. They would like to have bipartisan federal horizontal law. And they will never admit that they have inspiration in GDPR. I know you have Mr. Trump here today, so with full respect. Of course, they ask me a lot of questions about GDPR, and it will be similar arrangement. And we have adequacy decision, so the recognition of the similar standards with Japan, which is very important. What we plan with Japan is to create the global free flow of data area, where the similar, comparable, almost same rules and standards for data protection will be recognized. We would like to invite USA. I am working on it with my Japanese colleagues. Of course, we will be happy to invite United Kingdom after Brexit to join because United Kingdom is implementing GDPR, so the standards are here in case UK will not deviate from the rules in the future. So, but we see that the convergence in data protection rules pays off. And my colleague who does the trade portfolio, Cecilia Malmström, told me that around 40% of the services which are exported and imported are dependent on the free flow of data, and this number will be increasing. So for the international trade, to have the arrangement allowing the free flow of data is absolutely key, it's existentially important. Now coming to a little bit more apocalyptic part, I still remember the shock after Cambridge Analytica case. It was in March last year. I happened to be in the United States, so I saw the shock there. That was the moment when I realized the Americans will want to be better protected as well. Because it was a shock. Suddenly you saw that the algorithms with the high-tech use for marketing the products like shoes or vacuum cleaners or whatever you can imagine, the same algorithms which use the information about yourself, the intimate, very private information, these algorithms were used for selling the politicians, used in political campaign. And the data of people were stolen, were abused. It was against any thinkable rules. That's why the Cambridge Analytica case was such a wake-up call for us. There should be some fine imposed in the United States, I hope soon, but I must be, I don't know anything about that, but there are some indications that there should be a big fine imposed on Facebook, and also the British ICO already sanctioned Facebook. It was £500,000. It was the maximum fine they could impose on the company under the previous rules. If this had happened under GDPR, the fine might have been up to 4% of the annual turnover of the company. Global turnover. So you can imagine it would be a different story. Cambridge Analytica case was also a wake-up call for us from the perspective of organizing the elections in the EU. So we took a lot of preventive measures before the European elections to not to let such invasion into the private data happen again. Let me pause a bit for a while on illegal content and the responsibility of platforms. If you remember the time between 2015 and 2016, the horrible atmosphere in the society. I was not in UK those days, but I was in the Central Europe. I was in Brussels. The atmosphere caused by the combination of migration and terrorist attacks was so explosive, and it was fueled so intensively by social media that we needed to take some measures to stop it quickly. You can imagine for the European legislator to do something quickly, considering the legislative process, it was a challenge. So, but I realized that we should apply this principle. What is illegal offline must be illegal online. And we came to an agreement with the first big four, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Twitter, later some others joined this, and we created the code of conduct, or they agreed on the code of conduct, which means, simply said, that they will remove the hate speech against groups of people or individuals within 24 hours after notification or after they themselves find such hate speech. Some said that it is censoring. I was advised to read Orwell. Jourová, read Orwell. This is what you are creating in Europe. But I still insist on the conviction that we did the necessary thing. Because just imagine that the hate speech of some intensity is prohibited by all criminal laws in the EU member states, including UK. So why, if somebody draws the Hakenkreuz on the fence, why the owner of the fence is asked by the police immediately, remove it? Maybe there are several people passing by the fence. And why we should leave it online where millions of people see it. Suddenly it was quite clear that we have to act. And the tech companies agreed with this arrangement, and they increased capacities. They are working on it till today because they knew that this arrangement based on or imposing some kind of social responsibility on them is better than if we impose legal liability and say you are co-responsible for the criminal act which is seen on in your platform. We are continuing this code of conduct till now, but in Germany already they have the law which imposed the legal liability, and there the tech companies are under the sanction. So this is hate speech. Our logic of looking at illegal content is we consider the intensity of threat. So we addressed hate speech by this code of conduct, which is self-regulatory framework. But on terrorism and child pornography and child sexual abuse, we proposed the hard legislation. So now it is in the process. On terrorism, this is still to be adopted. And there we want the tech companies to remove the terrorist content in 1 hour after notification. It's tough. After Christchurch, horrible terrorist attack in New Zealand, the shooting was recorded in real time. It was a new phenomenon. And Facebook removed it in 16 minutes. And still they were criticized that they didn't act quickly enough, because then they needed 1 more week to remove the copies circulating on the network. But I was not bashing them. I was asked by the journalists many times, what do you say? Facebook didn't act. Well, this was a new situation. And 16 minutes, well, there was an action. I don't know what's the relevant time. 1 minute, 2 minutes, there are some limits. But they admitted next time they have to do better. And I just want to illustrate how this topic is also developing, how the new methods are used by the criminals and how difficult it is to address them. So it was hate speech, terrorism, child sexual abuse. What about fake news? Lying is not illegal, is it? This is a very delicate chapter, because I, also due to my past, as I told you, I lived in the totalitarian regime. I really don't want to have any commissioner of truth, or minister of truth, or I don't know who of truth. Truth is a difficult subject, isn't it? Some say it's objective, some say it's always subjective. When I studied philosophy, we devoted 1 year for talks about what truth is. And believe me, the internet era didn't give any answers on what the truth is. So on fake news, we are very careful. We came with some arrangements to stop the intentional disinformation attack, which purpose is to disrupt the society, to create the panic or to create the hysteria in some parts of the society. We issued the action plan against fake news, where we identified that part of the disinformation is produced outside Europe, especially we mentioned explicitly Russia, which is relevant especially for the eastern part of the EU, but also other external actors are learning quickly from Russia. And you know, I'm sensitive about Russia because my first memory in my life was the Soviet tank in my street in 1968. So I am very careful and very, very vigilant. And I remember very well how Soviet and Russian propaganda worked and works. 100 times repeated lie is becoming the truth. It's well used now in the EU, using the American technologies to be more efficient with it. You see, so Europe must not remain in such trap, and we had to do something. The European elections, however, didn't show any concrete, strong disinformation attacks from outside, but revealed another thing, that we have enough our own European producers. It was inside, the production of the fake news was inside the EU. We are going to assess and evaluate what happened in the campaign soon, and of course we will publish the report. I know that I speak too long. Do I? Yeah. So the last chapter, artificial intelligence. This is the important part of the tech revolution. And again, what makes AI special? It can improve our life. It can improve many sectors. It can improve and create new opportunities for European economy. But of course, there are again the risks which should be addressed. So how? What the EU is planning? First of all, the three things we want to focus on: the people, the money, and the rules. I spoke a little bit about the people. We need to support the research and to keep the researchers working in Europe for European human-centric solutions for AI, because this is very important. This is that is the difference between the US and Chinese approach. We want to have the development of AI, but not at the expense of fundamental rights and not freedoms and all the other values which are so dear to us. So the people, the society, we need to prepare the society for the changing in the world of labor. I spoke about it before. The money, we want to support in the EU several centers of excellence which will work in this field, plus a number of hubs in each member state. The estimated budget for the development of AI is roughly 20 billion euro a year for the EU. But here we want to combine the EU budget money, the member states' money, plus the private money. So it should be the combination of funding. Because we foresee the combination of money, we of course foresee the cooperation between the world of research, between the world of business, and between the world of politics. This is absolutely important factor that we have to cooperate. And we have also to cooperate on international basis. The centers of excellence which we want to develop should have the partners maybe also overseas. Europe wants to keep open. I am sure if Brexit comes to life, there will be space also for a room for cooperation with UK scientists. You see how optimistic I am all the time? Well, the ways to the future. As for the rules, I said GDPR is in place. For any innovation, including AI, we will be strict on this. The GDPR rules, which enhance this human-centric approach, have to be respected and complied with. But that's it. You will not find any other regulation. We issued the ethics guidelines, which said clearly what we don't want to happen in the EU. So for the algorithms, we require transparency and accountability. We don't want any black box to be created. We want the people to understand what happened to their data when it comes to AI. We don't want to copy-paste the imperfections of the real world into the AI, including all the bias and the bad things which we have in the real life. We want to create by these ethics principles, by issuing the ethics principles, we wanted to buy more time before the possible future regulation. We simply want to see how it works. And then maybe in several years' time, there might be addressed several things by the regulation, mainly the liability for damages. You know that in Arizona there is already one person killed by the autonomous car, so these kind of situations should be addressed by the regulation. So it's the liability for damages, the safety of products, and some other things. For the moment, we say, and we will still issue one policy paper on this, that the rules which we have in the civil law should apply for AI situations. So again, the same principle, what applies offline will or should apply online or in AI world. So I was jumping a little bit from one topic to another, but I hope that you were able to follow it. And what will come after the elections, nobody knows. But let's hope that the EU will retain this proportionate, hopefully smart approach and to do everything to help the EU to be more competitive in global scope and to moderate or to facilitate the development of technologies in the direction which will be positive for the people. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, thank you. And not just for an enlightening and truly interesting talk and vivid with example and looking at the challenges that we currently face together. But thank you also for all your work over the years, particularly in the equality space and of course for GDPR. It really has been something of momentous culture change catalyst that has really made data processors, data handlers, and people who have any kind of data responsibility or interest think very carefully. As much as some of the larger corporations may have to act more quickly to regulate more appropriately, everyone is thinking about this in terms of how data is processed. Truly, it has been a culture change phenomenon. But if I may, and this is not to challenge you, but these are challenges we all face. Thinking about culture change, what we're looking at in terms of diversity, in terms of bias, in terms of environmental factors, and in terms of inequality and poverty and anxiety, particularly with things like the migrant crisis and the UN's reports on the various issues that affect, including the UK, other countries in terms of poverty and inequality enhancement. if I may, how do you feel that GDPR's landing and nestling in with other regulations can help guide us to look to try and improve the issues around inequalities and around the environmental factors?
Thank you very much for this question. Well, the topic of inequality is one of the most alerting ones. At this moment, we hear it from the people in the EU that they are fed up of the unfairness and the difficult access to justice and many other things which I have also on my table. And this is much wider than GDPR issue. This is about how we manage to enable the digitalization to decrease the inequalities and not to deepen the gaps we have in the society. And there are the different ways we try to do that. We work a lot we are supporting the educational systems in the EU. We have the so-called skills agenda, where there is a full chapter on how the digital technologies should be used in favor of all the parts of our society, especially how it should serve also to the children which come from some problematic background, and how to help them to catch up and not to lose the opportunity. This is a very, very important topic, and if we miss this, if we fail on this, we will face incredibly difficult societal changes and atmosphere into society. For instance, I will give you an example. I still have it in my mind. After 3 years, I discussed with Google, because Google wanted to show more willingness to cooperate also on some social projects. So I discussed with them, what can we do for the Roma children living in the settlements in the Eastern Europe? I will not say which country I had in mind, but the children live in horrible conditions. And I realized that if we do not give them a chance to catch up with the digital development and and use the possibility of education through internet, we will just create another lost generation. And Google said, yes, we can work there more intensively, and we can help, and we can invest, and we can connect with the government, which also has some funds, and also the EU funds to help. And the answer of the government when I approached them with this proposal was, okay, you mean these and these settlements? They will be happy to get drinking water in 5 years' time. It was the end of the story, and I was very upset. Of course, I took some action afterwards. I will not name and shame, but this just illustrates where we are, and that this might be a horrible failure if we do not work in the direction of helping not only children in problematic areas, but also seniors and the people with lower education to catch up.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we have a bit of time for questions from the audience, and there's a mic or two coming around. Just state your name and any relevant affiliation. And yeah, so we've got a gentleman at the back there. I'll do 2 or 3 at a time, and please try and keep them relatively concise.
Excuse me, thank you very much. Ewan Grant, I'm a former intelligence analyst who's worked on various EC-funded programs, mainly in the Balkans and in Ukraine. My question is predicated on that and the Commissioner's last comment about the Roma, and also the fact that I have seen the dark side of the Commission where things have been suboptimal. My question is, given that the AI and the new digital revolution is so all-embracing, I mean, it affects virtually everything, how well do you see the Commission joining things up within its various bodies? How well do you see member states joining it up within their bodies as well? And do you feel that the technology giants are doing enough to inform their geeks? Because in my experience, geeks and policymakers don't always go together. It's not easy working with geeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
What are geeks?
Probably the engineers. Any more questions? Yeah. Gentleman at the front.
Thank you. I'm Josh Shearer, I'm from Ofcom. Just wanted to ask you regarding the role of data, and you said that the only legislation that's been introduced so far is GDPR, and you're adopting a wait-and-see attitude. What are your thoughts on terms of how data and the ownership of data and data mining and artificial intelligence techniques are now embedding in concentration in a lot of online platform fields? And the very nature of the way a lot of these online platforms work is meaning that it is an insurmountable barrier for other competitive firms to surmount without any change to the current system of competition or antitrust.
Thank you. And we have one more question from the lady just there.
Thank you. My name is Eva Turner. I'm a former lecturer, computer scientist. I wanted to ask you, in all of this, and the debate is now 30 plus years old, do you, in terms of your thinking, have a specific little box somewhere for gender equality? Because we do know that AI, other and embedded systems are inherently difficult in patrolling gender equality. It's an ages-old question, and in terms of those who build those systems, AI and others are 157% male.
Thank you. So we'll, yeah. I think we'll, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if I understood fully the first question on where the member states are on
Member states,
on AI.
and the Commission.
Okay. And the Commission.
Very much so, and there are reasons for that.
You would be surprised how member states are supportive for the idea that we should deal with most of the issues which I spoke about on European level. Because digital has no borders, it's an extra layer above our heads. I could tell you really shocking stories about how difficult it is now to investigate the criminal cross-border cases where well, I propose the legislation to speed up the investigation because the evidence on criminal offences is somewhere abroad, and it takes 120 days for the prosecutor from state A to get the evidence. It's really the digital revolution causes a lot of problems which have pan-European scope. That's why the member states admitted that we need to replace 28 different privacy regimes by one. which is GDPR. The member states admitted that we should deal together with the things connected with illegal content. I have very strong mandate from the Ministers of Justice to continue this code of conduct, and in case of no way to propose the legislation. There is a very strong support from the member states to have pan-European solution for terrorism, for copyright. You remember, it's not about illegal content, it's about legal content distributed illegally, in fact. It's another story. So all in all, and for competition, of course. My colleague Margaret Vestager, has very strong mandate to go after the cases of the breach of competition rules in the EU from the side of giant tech. And I see one exception, it's the digital tax. There was a debate about whether to tax the big tech. In my view, yes, we have to do that. And we wanted to do it, again, by European tax, but the member states didn't want to do that. So, yes, now it will be fragmented. All the member states are preparing something in this area. I only wish that once they have the digital tax, they will use the collected money to remedy the problems caused by social media and by the digital development which goes in the wrong direction. For instance, the victims of crime and so on. For 5G, we will see. The member states asked for the recommendation of the Commission, and we gave the recommendation, and we will come back to it in October this year with some kind of final recommendation after all the member states will undertake their risk assessment of whether the technologies, some technologies can pose the security threat. So there is a lot of things, majority of things related to AI and digital are solved with very strong yes from the member states on a European level. And this yes is also supported by the fact that the EU wants to finance a lot of those things. So it's a good habit that if the EU, I know I speak too long, if the EU is paying for something, then there is the right to say how the things should be. So how the tech giants work together?
Oh, I think the question's on gender equality and...
Nature of social platforms, we have the competition rules and the new regulation which should regulate the business-to-business relations because we see that the giant platforms are not creating level playing field for the small ones which use the platform. So you can look at it. Also, the GDPR, I think that its aim is to create the level playing field. There is the risk-based approach. So at this moment, the data protection authorities are looking, especially, not only, but especially at the big data processors, which could pose the bigger problem to the private data of people. On gender equality, thank you for this question. I said before that we must not allow the AI to copy-paste all the bad things from the real life. That's why in our ethics guidelines we recommend that already the way the algorithms are designed must be traceable, must be accountable, that we have to be able to get the answers on how the algorithm works, and the protection against any kind of discrimination must be embedded in it from the very beginning. So this is for AI. as for the hate, illegal online hate speech, we just 1 month ago launched the Digital Respect for Her campaign, which is addressing a especially disgusting phenomenon, which is the violence against women online. You will not believe it, maybe 27 times more often the women are targets of hate speech than men. And it is the sciencing factor. What I hear from young women who would like to become journalists or politicians, we will not do it because we fear it's not the way we can continue further. Internet is a fantastic democratic instrument. So let's be careful about not to have it only for some part of the society. So I agree, we have to do more on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's take 3 more questions. So the gentleman on the aisle.
Yes, Carl Wright. I've worked with those international organisations over the years, including the EU. Commissioner, first of all, let me thank you for your excellent address, and I think you've given us a very good reason, among other things, why Britain should stay a member of the European Union. But the question I've got specifically refers to the visit you mentioned today of President Trump. We have the delight of President Trump coming to London, and President Trump has decreed that millions of European consumers who use Huawei, including myself, not permitted to use that because of interference by the Chinese government, or potential interference. At the same time, the American government has interfered on his orders with Google to stop those European consumers like myself getting Google updates on Huawei, which seems a little bit hypocritical. But what is your view about Huawei and the position of the USA on this? Particularly also the question I raised about the interference with the right of European consumers to choose what technology they want.
Can I answer? And then I will be quick.
Okay, sure.
Because then I forget.
Of course.
Mr. Trump gave a nickname to my colleague, Margaret Vestager, who does competition, that horrible tax lady. And I really wanted to have a nickname from Mr. Trump, that horrible privacy lady. I would be so happy, but I will not manage to do something horrible to him. But I promise to be quick. On Huawei, as I said, we recommended the member states to do the risk analysis, state by state, on what risk they see on this. And we will come back to it in October after collecting the data and the assessments from the member state side. I will share with you my personal view. I don't think we have the right to undertake any slightest risk. The assessment of today, what we see that there is no risk now, it's not relevant in my view. I think that we must take responsible or do responsible arrangements not to enable to any future risk to happen. Because when we will see the risk, it will be late. But it's my personal view. We will see how the member states will assess the situation, and in October still this commission will come with the recommendation.
Thank you. So the gentleman in the white T-shirt in the middle.
Do we have some pre-planned questions? No? I thought you were selective. Sorry.
There's no trap, don't worry.
Hi, my name's George. I am a strategy lead at a large digital marketing agency. And my question has to do with the sort of divide between regulation and innovation that you started off by talking about. I sometimes wonder how much that might be a bit of a false dichotomy at times, because although I know that the big tech companies in recent times have made some good noises about trying to take more action against some of the things that we've discussed today and the issues that we've discussed, the code of ethics that has been signed up to isn't legally binding. It seems to be based a lot on goodwill, which I believe is there to some extent. But to what the man at the back said, there's often a big disconnect between what happens at the top of people at the top of organizations and how that filters down to the people who are actually putting together some of the algorithms that we've discussed. I went to an artificial intelligence event at Google last week, and there was a massive difference in the content of what was discussed, in that at no point did anyone talk about the way that we can prevent, you know, the biases becoming embedded in these algorithms. And these are the engineers that we were talking to. And they're good people. They weren't out to do anything malicious at all. But for me, it really did just indicate that actually we do need a degree of regulation, because although there is goodwill, ultimately it's not a case of capability to tackle these issues. It's about prioritization. And as someone who's constantly in conversations with Google and Facebook and all of them about how effective their advertising techniques are, those are things they get incentivized to do as employees of a company who are trying to make it on their day-to-day. So I wonder whether or not there's a little bit of naivety at times about whether or not these big tech companies are actually going to prioritize the things that we need them to.
I think I said that my prediction is that some regulation will follow. At this moment, we set these principles and we are monitoring the situation, and we are very careful. We are vigilant, and we have very good channel of information, both from the businesses and from scientific level and from the member states. And we constantly analyze the situation. And my prediction is that the next Commission will come with some of the regulations. For algorithms, as I said before, for liability, for damages, maybe for some other things. But the algorithms, their transparency and accountability, it's the main thing which we are looking at and which might be somehow regulated.
I'm very aware of Commissioner Jourova's schedule, so maybe time for one more question. The lady there in the middle.
Hello, I'm Dunya. I'm from the Student Policy Incubator, European Horizons. And Commissioner, my question is, in the beginning you mentioned trust and the importance of trust. And from people in my age group and also people I know, my friends, there's been a lot of rage about things such as Article 13, fueled by and on social media. And I often realize that these people have strong emotions about these things and get the information through different channels, perhaps YouTube videos mostly, but are not really, some of them well informed about the whole context of data privacy. And I was wondering what can be done to include the younger generation and regain trust of younger people.
I just need to abuse my role as chair to ask one final question. If Brexit does happen, is the UK going to get an adequacy decision?
Haven't I told you that I'm very vigilant? I almost wanted to say yes. Well, I will come back to your question, but this was so provocative. UK is implementing GDPR in full by now. So that's why I asked today the ICO vice chair whether there is the appetite in the official circles in the UK to deviate from GDPR, and it doesn't seem to be the case. So if we have the same legal framework and the same philosophy and the same principles in mind, then I don't see any reason why there shouldn't be an adequacy in due time, but it cannot be tomorrow.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Younger generation and trust. I would say that I don't know if trust is missing. I think the information is missing, and the carefulness is missing. Wasn't it here when the young girl committed suicide being instructed by internet?
Yes. Instagram.
Did she have trust? Maybe yes. And where did it lead? And I was under the pressure to come with the regulation to address this kind of phenomenon. And my answer on this is we must make sure that Google is not the mother and Facebook is not the father of the children. You know, there is so much hypocrisy. Every time I feel the pressures on more regulation of internet, there is always something behind this, that we are failing in normal life, that we are giving up some basic functions of the society, of education of the family. Let's work in this direction as well. How to do it? Have I answered? More trust. I would say trust and check. There should be more emphasis on education and more invested into informing the children what can happen, how the whole world works. I mean the world of social media, what's happening to their data, what might happen, but to do it in a reasonable way, not to create the army of young paranoid people. This is what I would not like to do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for an enlightening talk and discussion. We really appreciate you coming to us today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.